Identifying and Storing AV Material, Audio, by Emily Reed Jordan, Digital and Audiovisual Records Archivist for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. This tutorial is an online webinar by the Technology Committee of the Archivists for Congregations of Women Religious. The material of an archival collection is composed of a variety of records in different formats. In your role as an archivist, you will probably encounter some records that aren't made of paper, but are rather audiovisual in nature. Maybe you aren't as familiar with audiovisual or AV records as you'd like to be. How are you supposed to describe, preserve, and create access to these records when you're not familiar with them? This webinar is a short introduction into identifying different types of audio AV. It will also give best practices in physically storing audio AV material in your repository. Proper storage is the most basic and most essential preservation action you can take with this material. I'd also like to note that in this webinar we will only be discussing physical audio AV formats. We'll leave digital AV file formats for another tutorial. We will also not be discussing photographic material. First, let's look at how you ID and store commonly encountered audio formats in your repository. Audio cassette tape. These are small containers called a cassette that houses 1/8 of an inch of magnetic tape. Audio cassettes are often further ID'd by how long their tape can be played. You'll see on the side of the cassette numbers noting how many minutes of recorded sound your cassette can hold. Commonly, these are 30 for 30 minutes, 60, and 90. This information might be good to note for any further digitization plans. So how do you store audio cassettes? You want to keep them in an archival box so they are away from dust, dirt, sunlight, and water. You also want to keep them away from strong magnetic fields to avoid information loss. Also, it's advisable to store them so that they are sitting vertically. Anything wound on a reel should not lay flat. Ideal storage conditions is around 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's too hot, you can cause the tape pack to become too tight and distort. If it's too cold, the tape's lubricant can sweat and shorten its lifespan. Ideal relative humidity is around 20 to 40%. Next, we have compact disc. Commonly called a CD, this is a digital optical disc. There are 3 varieties of CDs, a CD, a CDR, and a CDRW. However, these varieties are not noteworthy in concerns of their storage, and many archives don't bother distinguishing between varieties when they are IDing them. How do you store compact discs? Be sure that your CDs are stored in a protective sleeve or in their original plastic case. Then you can store your encased CDs in any archival box. These containers help keep away dust, dirt, and water. Sunlight in particular is also very damaging to CDs due to the type of dye that is used. Ideal temperature storage is around 58 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Abrupt temperature change can cause stress to the layers of the disc and should be avoided. Ideal relative humidity is around 30 to 50%. Reel-to-reel audio tape, also called open reel magnetic tape or 1/4 inch audio tape. This format, like its name implies, is magnetic tape wound on a reel. They might come in different size reels, but you'll know it's reel-to-reel audio tape because the magnetic tape is always 1/4 of an inch wide. Sometimes on the reel you'll see a measurement of how many feet of tape there is. 700 feet and 1200 feet are common sizes. This type of information might be good to note for any future digitization plans. How do you store reel-to-reel audio tape? Since reel-to-reel audio tape is an open reel, you'll want this format to have a container of some variety. You can use its original box, an alkaline buffered box, or even a padded manuscript folder. This extra container helps keep away dust, dirt, sunlight, and water. You also want to keep them away from strong magnetic fields to avoid information loss. Also, it's advisable to store them so that they are sitting vertically. Anything wound on a reel should not lay flat. Ideal temperature storage conditions is around 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's too hot, you can cause the tape pack to become too tight and distort. If it's too cold, the tape's lubricant can sweat and shorten its lifespan. Ideal relative humidity is around 20 to 40%. Next, we have phonographic records, a flat disc with an inscribed modulated spiral groove. These are commonly called vinyl records, although that name is often inaccurate. Phonographic records could be made from vinyl, shellac, lacquer, or even paper. Sometimes phonographic records are just called records or gramophone record, or LPs, which stand for long playing. Some people ID them by their rotational speed. The three most common speeds for phonographic records are 33 1/3 revolutions per minute, or RPM, 45 RPM, and 78 RPM. Phonographic records can range in size, the most common being 7 inches, 10 inches, and 12 inches. The RPM, size, and material of your phonographic records will not affect how you store this AV material, but it is important that you clearly ID these records with their correct speed, size, and material composition if possible. This will assist you in any future digitization and preservation. How do you store phonographic records? It's preferable to store your phonographic records in a polyethylene sleeve rather than their own original paper sleeves, as those are often very acidic. However, something is better than nothing. Because of the grooves on this record, you want to protect it from dust and dirt. Once sleeved, you should store your phonographic records vertically in archival boxes that can fit to the largest size of your records, 10 or 12 inches. Separate your phonographic records with dividers every 5 to 10 records to prevent warping. Use dividers in your archival box to help you keep the records standing straight as well. Ideal temperature storage conditions is around 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Ideal relative humidity is between 40 and 50%. Now let's ID some more uncommon formats. There's microcassette, which is a smaller version of an audiocassette tape. It has magnetic tape that is the same width as audiocassette tape, but it's thinner and records at half the speed. It was popularly used in the 1970s through 1980s for recorded voice. Then there's 8-track tape, also called stereo 8 or 8-track cartridge. This is magnetic tape housed on a single reel in a plastic cartridge. It measures around 5.5 inches by 4 inches. These were used before audiocassette became popular. There's DAT tape. It looks similar to audiocassette tape. However, this tape is digital rather than magnetic, and its physical dimensions are about half the size. It was created to replace audiocassette tapes, but never became as popular. Mini disc is another format. It's a magneto-optical disc housed in a permanent cartridge with a sliding door, similar to a floppy disk. It was a precursor to CDs. Then there's wire recording. Created between the late 1930s and 1950s, this magnetic wire has electromagnetic signals encoded in the metal. The wire is very small, 37 gauge steel wire, and is wound around a small reel. Then there's cylinder recordings. Created between 1896 and the late 1920s, this is the first commercial sound medium ever created. The cylinders are hollow and around 4 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. They are engraved on the outside surface. They would have originally been housed in a cardboard box. These cylinders are made out of wax or later celluloid. How should you house these uncommon formats? These formats either came in a cartridge and/or also a box or container. If they are missing a box or container, house these formats in an archival paper sleeve. Store the cartridges and/or sleeved media in archival boxes to protect them from dust, dirt, sunlight, and water. Ideal temperature is around 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Ideal relative humidity is around 40%. So now you know how to ID physical audio media. Now you're probably wondering where to find the archival supplies to house them. Gaylord and Hollinger have excellent websites where you can look through their AV storage offerings. I also talked in this tutorial about creating ID notes about your AV. You can do this in several ways and make it as detailed or as not as you want to make it. You could create Excel spreadsheets. Ones that track individual media objects by format is common. You can create fields that record things like media type, manufacturer information, storage capacity, label info and markings, date, condition notes, and etc. Or you could make a general AV material list in a Word document for each collection. Or maybe you have an asset management system or other database you use to track material. There are a variety of ways to create your ID notes. It's important to have these notes to use in your finding aids, internal statistics, and to help you plan for future projects with your AV records. Thanks to the ACWR Board and Technology Committee for producing these tutorials. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact ACWR at acwrarchivists@gmail.com or visit our website.